Alamitos Unified School District Board of Education meeting, and we will start this off with a roll call.
Mrs. Russell.
Here.
Mr. Boyer.
Here.
Ms. Cattouli.
Here.
Ms. Davidson.
Here.
Mrs. Hill.
Here. Okay, do we have any community and staff participation during the workshops? No. Seeing none, we'll go directly into our workshops, which are filled with information. Our first one is an update on contingency planning and reopening of our schools. This is a workshop. Dr. Pulver, would you like to start?
I would. Thank you, Madam President. Esteemed members of the board, just want to remind you to bring your mics a little bit closer as you're speaking through your mask. Thank you for those that are with us today, both in person and on video. We have pledged to our community that until we communicate our plan, and part of the reason we've pushed back our start date to August 31st for students is to give us ample time to really be able to properly plan for a myriad of options. I think there's some confusion out there that we have decided our plan and that a plan is going to be communicated out today. That is not the case. One of the things that I'm really proud of our district is this planning. We have tried to make it extremely collaborative and involve a lot of individuals in this process. As Mrs. Reed will be sharing briefly, and so will Mrs. Davidson in her board report tonight, is we've had our committees of 50 plus teachers and administrators and staff, and that has grown in various subcommittees to well over 70, kind of through an accordion style. In this process, and so we are not completed. We do know that we're going to take every opportunity we have and every week. I'm thankful for that, because if we were making decisions today, I do believe they would likely have to be more restrictive than what is possible for the next in the next few weeks as well. There's been some confusion as well that I just wanted to share. The Orange County Board of Education had a board meeting last night, and it's been in the press both yesterday and today. As all of you are very well aware, but the public may not, the decisions of how we choose to reopen schools is going to be largely based upon this board of 5 board members that are elected to serve responsibly this community. And so we have been, the difference there, I think the confusion is Orange County Board of Education and the Department of Education is a little different than others, and it's not operated the way a school district is. One of the unique counties where all 5 of the board members of the county are elected by Orange County residents, as well as the superintendent of Orange County Schools is elected. And so there are differences in terms of scope and authority, and sometimes unlike here as a board, the board comes together and makes a decision on who they want to hire as the superintendent, and together with the superintendent they become united to create a governance team. And that's not necessarily the case always at the county level, just given the different structure in which it's made up. And so the white paper that people are hearing about that the Board of Education has adopted last night has not been a document that we've been working off of. So while they have been using some experts to help guide them, and I don't know if we would agree or disagree with some of the input there, it's certainly not any more of an expert guidance that we can be held accountable to, other than really the state guidance, which is the California Department of Public Health. And so we continue to use their guidance on school reopening guidelines, along with Orange County, and this is where it's a little bit different. It's the Department of Education has worked a little bit with the Orange County Public Health Care Agency, which the Orange County Health Care Agency is mostly referring back to the CDPH, California Department of Health. And so we're using those 2 documents. Mrs. Reed will explain that a little bit more in her presentation, will become a little bit more obvious. We continue, and you'll see that, are really planning to be able to offer 2 programs for families to decide on what they believe is best for their children. Now, that's provided that we can come up with the right plan and keep staff safe in the plans, and then keep staff engaged to want to be able to participate in that process. But our reopening process is it's not cheap. But we really believe it's dollars well spent to ensure that we can provide the proper education for our students. And so I believe already we will be spending well over $1 million to reopen our schools, to take some of the various safety precautions and enhanced measures. I've had a lot of parents, PTA parents, our booster groups who have reached out to us and have asked, how can they help? They want to help financially if possible, because they have a vested interest in this opportunity, and they do understand that budgets are finite and that schools have been cut to some level. The state is providing some funding for that for us, but nowhere near. LAIF has also provided an opportunity, and we'll be exploring that with them. They are willing to kind of ask particularly because so many parents have asked, how can they help? LAIF is willing to try to help seek a financial donation from our families once they realize what the expenses are, to try to help with this. One of the things I did want to bring is we purchased desk shields for every single student who will be provided live instruction, whether it's in a hybrid program or traditional. And so these are shields that they're not cheap. It's probably over $150,000 alone just in these shields, that when you use them, every student desk can have this. And this table is wider than a desk, so maybe I should bring it a little bit closer to me. And as you can imagine, it does have a clear ability for the student to be able to look at the teacher and what's going on. It's not clear on the sides, and I'm sorry you can't see me with that. But what we believe is, in the current guidance right now, that's why we're all wearing face masks, is that we believe that the guidance will probably still be in some form or effect of facial coverings for students, whether that's a covering like a clear shield that I have or whatnot. There will be exceptions for students. Already we're hearing for students who have health needs or special needs that can't wear a face covering. We also believe that if they're working independently at their desk, that this according to the guidance of the California Department of Public Health, along with the Orange County, that if you're not social distancing, to have physical barriers like this in between students when you can't do the full 6 feet. We think it could also provide potentially an opportunity for students, if they're working at their desk, that maybe they could take their face mask off, because this is now serving as a face covering as well. We don't know that fully yet, but we think it was worth the expenditure. This takes about 5 to 6 weeks to go ahead and order. So again, I'm thankful that we have pushed our calendar back to August 31st. Mrs. Reed will talk about a whole host of other extended opportunities that we are safety measures that we are taking to fall to plan for, to be able to bring our students back in a couple options. But again, for families that don't feel that this is a safe option for them to return physically to campus, we will have a virtual option. That alone is going to be about $400,000 to $500,000. It's money well spent. And then we'll have some form of in-person option. Now, the one thing that I would say at any time along this process is that's as of today. The conditions change. So yesterday the governor did say during his press release that they'll be providing new guidance documents and some more clarity regarding face masks from a state level. Those have not yet been released. So we're using the current guidance that we have. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Reed, who's going to go in depth a little bit. This is our third update. It is an update of the work that our committees have been doing since the last board meeting. So thank you very much, Mrs. Reed.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pulver, Madam President. So it is my pleasure to once again update the board on the work of our teaching committees. And so I want to start today just by providing a recap of past updates. And so previously in our first two board updates, we have reviewed the emergency distance learning calendar and reopening survey results, both from our teaching staff and our parent community. We also updated the board on the reopening of Los Alamitos High School athletics and visual performing arts. And as many of you know, Friday, July 10th was our last day of summer workouts until further notice. We were informed by the county that youth sports would be suspended in California while they're awaiting guidance from county health offices. And so we will, when we get the additional guidance, we look at our opening plans to see if there's any necessary or needed modifications that we may need to make to those guidelines so that we can bring back athletes and performing arts groups onto campus for summer workouts if we're allowed to. We've also updated the board on the work of the Remote Teaching and Distance Learning Committee, and so that is the large overarching committee that has been doing the majority of the work. And so as Dr. Pulver shared earlier, Our RTDL committee is comprised of 52 members, which is a large group. It oversees TK through 12 with teachers from every grade level, as well as every department at the secondary level, as well as administrators from every level and members of the district office team. We also previously expanded that group to about 72 members as we really started our work this school year prioritizing the remote setting. As many of you know, when we did our initial parent survey, regardless of the situations that we posed to families, we had roughly 15 to 20% of families who in any reopening setting were indicating to us that they would prefer their student to be in a distance learning model. And so we knew that the opening of school at that time, we started this work the first week of June, was quite far away. We knew the one for sure thing we needed to have available was a remote setting for students. And so we really started by prioritizing that work. And so we spent about 3 weeks numerous meetings. I mean, up to this point, we've had about 20 committee meetings. And so those meetings were lengthy, 2 hours apiece, all different cohorts and cadres of teachers, listening to vendor presentations, talking about instructional relevancy, how do we engage students, what does distance learning actually look like? Very different from the emergency distance learning, which we know we enacted when our schools closed their doors that Friday, March 13th. And so through that process, the priority really was to vet a comprehensive digital learning platform and curriculum. And so we are bringing forward tonight a contract with our selected vendor, Schools PLP. And so our Schools PLP is a PK-12 comprehensive learning management system that will also serve as a supplemental curriculum. And so one of the things that we didn't set out to do, but we definitely changed and modified our thinking was that in lieu of just buying these licenses for students who would be choosing to be part of our 100% remote learning program, we did purchase a district license so that all students in the district would have access and teachers to this learning management system. We really felt that as time went by, and it's very challenging. There's constant updates and constant change. We really wanted to be able to be nimble. And so regardless of the setting in which we start our school year, we know that we may have to be flexible. If we were to start in a hybrid setting, there might be a time we have to mitigate all students to a remote setting if our school's closed again. If we opened in a traditional setting and something changed and we had to migrate over to a hybrid setting, we didn't want to react the way we were forced to last March. We wanted to be very proactive. And so being able to train all teachers on this learning management system and also have our students, regardless of setting, come August, begin to log in and use the technology, we felt we'd be better prepared for student success and teacher success, not knowing what this upcoming school year would bring to us. So with that remote setting, we will be at the end of this month launching registration opportunities for what we're calling LoSal at Home. It's really a distance learning option for all families. And so it will be our remote setting. As I shared earlier, we did have about 20% of families have an interest in a 100% distance learning model. And so it will be a TK-12 option for all families who would prefer a 100% remote setting for the 2020-21 school year. And so parents and guardians would register for LoSal at Home at the end of July, and they'd be committing for the 2020-21 school year. So it will be a full school year commitment.
That means for 2021, totally, they would be remote. They couldn't come back and do anything else.
That's a great question, Mrs. Russell. So yes, we're asking for a year commitment because our staffing is tied to this. So as you remove students from our traditional brick and mortar campuses, we're also having to place staff, right, to be a distance teacher. So in the primary grades, for example, we're 24-1. So if I knew as an elementary principal that 20% of my students were coming off campus, I would also be allocating 20% of my teaching staff, right, to be able to meet the needs of those students. Now, if a student would choose to want to come back to brick and mortar, I could already be maxed out at 24-1 in my brick and mortar classrooms. And so the ability to migrate back to a traditional brick and mortar setting, regardless if that's traditional or a hybrid, would be purely based on our enrollment and if we were able to intake a student at that grade level at that particular time at the particular school site that maybe they traditionally had come from. So there'd be a lot of factors at play. If we had the room, we'd always welcome back our students. But we also have to make sure that we're not overreaching the facilities that we would have in our traditional brick and mortar and the agreements that we have with our teachers in those settings as well.
And we do think that it's possible. Our elementary and our secondary schools will all be on a semester system next year. And so we do think there may be more fluid opportunities at a natural semester break, which we're always going to be open to really. Part of the reason we're thinking about offering 2 programs is to serve the needs of our families. So those needs may change. We just also need our families to know that they can't make a decision for 3 weeks and then change in another. So it might have to be during some natural times, as long as we can accommodate that with our staffing.
Okay, I would just like to reiterate, it is more of a staffing issue than anything else, which makes sense, I'm sure, to everyone, because you need to have the teachers who are going to be taking care of the online students and teachers who, if we are actually going to be in our schools, taking care of the in-schools. And we have sizes and credentialing issues. It's way more complicated than just showing up and having a warm body in the classroom.
Absolutely, and it gets more complicated as the higher level classes in each of our middle schools and high schools, when you could have a singleton period of something like AP Music Theory. And so I think one of the main points I want to make sure that our families hear is that LoSal at Home will be LoSal teachers teaching live, providing live instruction to LoSal students, and that what we really purchase with Schools PLP, our outside vendor, is a learning management system. So when we closed down and had to implement emergency distance learning, we utilized Google Classroom across the school district for our students to be able to get messaging, assignments, turn and work with their classroom teachers. But as you can imagine, as a secondary student, you could have been managing 7 or 8 Google Classrooms. And so that is really overwhelming for a student and a family to be able to navigate. So when you partner with a company that offers you a comprehensive learning management system, picture a dashboard that you log into as a student, and I see all of my classes as tiles on one page. I can see my grade in each of those classes. I can see my missing assignments. I can see a calendar of what's upcoming. It can remind me of when I'm getting on live with my teacher. And so I'm really having this one access point that parents and students will be able to navigate through their distance learning materials. And so that really is the benefit of partnering with a vendor. We still are using our district adopted curricula. I think that's a question that many community members have as well. But what we're getting from Schools PLP is a cadre and cohort of digitized electronic supplements for our teachers, including assessment tools where teachers can very quickly digitize assessments they've had in their classroom and use for their practice for years, or quickly develop new assessments, as well as resources to videos, and just a host of resources for our teachers who are going to be deploying distance learning. Yes, Mrs. Hill.
Thank you. So when you talk about live instruction, so what does that look like? Does that look like, and I'm sure it's different with different grade levels, but is that a student sitting in front of a computer for 5 hours a day? Is it a student coming into various different sections? Can you give us a little bit more picture of what that looks like? Or if we're not there yet, I understand that as well.
I can give you a pretty accurate picture at the elementary level, but secondary is a little bit more nuanced. So I'll start with secondary and then I'll drill down to elementary. So think about a secondary school when we have maybe 6 sections of one course, 5 sections of another course, 2 of one course, and you have a very specific credential or expertise to teach that course. We really can't know until students indicate they're going to want to be part of LoSal at Home what those exact numbers are. And I doubt they're going to come in perfect batches of English 1, 32 students identified that they want distance learning. So we're going to have some of our expert teachers at the high school that are going to need to teach potentially virtual sections as well as brick and mortar sections. So exactly what the schedule looks like in our distance learning model will be highly dependent upon what the schedule looks like in our brick and mortar campuses, because we're going to have to be able to accommodate the mirroring of schedules for some teachers who are going to be teaching really in 2 modalities now: in person with students in the classroom, as well as providing live instruction for students who are part of LoSal at Home. At the elementary level, what you can anticipate is probably close to 2.5 hours of live instruction, and that could be more at the different grade levels. In a couple of minutes, I'm going to talk about a couple of assembly bills and Senate bills that have passed that give some leeway of that. That doesn't mean that's when the school day ends. That would mean that's when your live time with the teacher ends. And then the student would have some asynchronous work. So I think we're going to hear a lot of terminology tonight, asynchronous, synchronous, when we're talking about distance learning. And what that really means is synchronous, think about it, I'm in sync with someone. That's the teacher and I and my peers in my class. We're synchronously learning. We're on live together and we're working through learning in what you would consider in the traditional classroom environment. The teacher is providing instruction, students are following up, there's a check for understanding. It's really that ping pong of learning that you think about when you think about a classroom. Asynchronous learning, think about almost like homework. So asynchronous learning, I'm doing that on my own. It's the follow-up to my live instructions, what I'm going to do to practice those skills that a teacher just went through with me. So it's really part of a larger picture of gradual release, right? We do things together, and then you're going to do things on your own. And so that asynchronous time will be the assignments that a teacher would post and prepare students to do through their synchronous learning. So it's going to be a combination of those two. Our goal is that there would be a greater time spent with synchronous live instruction, and that's actually what we're called to do by the state of California as well. And I'll talk about that in just a couple slides.
And does the platform also give us the technology to allow for the teacher to instruct, or will that be in a different platform?
It does actually allow a teacher to instruct within it. That doesn't mean that some of our teachers won't employ other methods. So many of you are familiar with Zoom, and it has some other breakout features like breakout rooms that aren't built into the current school's PLP. So school's PLP offers video conferencing while all the students can log on in the traditional two-way communication with the teacher. But if a teacher is going to want to do something like provide breakout rooms, chat rooms, other things, they may include inside their school's PLP daily log a link for an outside video conference that they're using for a specific purpose that day.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. So our classes at LoSal at Home will follow the traditional LoSal curricular scope and sequence and curriculum. And so as I shared before, school's PLP is really just the digitized resource and content support for the work our teachers already perform inside our classrooms. All of the 9-12 classes are A through G approved, as well as NCAA approved.
I guess just from a technology standpoint, will they be able to access this through multiple devices? So if we all have Chromebooks, iMacs, laptops.
You could access this on your phone if you needed to.
So you'll be able to log into the software from any number of devices in the home.
It's a web-based
You don't want us to
platform.
be stuck with just this iPad or just that Google Chrome. You can maybe go to a bigger monitor.
Absolutely.
And actually be able to see what's going on as opposed to. Okay, all right.
Yeah, so Schools PLP is a web-based platform, so really any device that has a web browser, a student would be able to access the site.
All right.
And so as I was sharing, all of our classes at the 9 through 12 level are A through G and NCAA approved. And one thing that we're still working on is our 6-12 elective offerings. So when you look at a master schedule at middle school and high school, we really offer, we talk about the 4 A's for a reason. It really is, we are a large, comprehensive high school, and we strive to offer everything we can in the area of activities and the arts. And some of those aren't replicatable on the same level in a distance learning model. And so our elective offerings may not be an exact mirror image of all of the offerings that we're able to offer to a population of 3,200 students. So as many of you know, we operate on student demand scheduling at both the middle school and high school. And so that will be very similar here. Once we enroll our students, we have to look at what do students need, what's already in their scope and sequence in their 4-year plan if they're at the high school, and then what can we offer that fits into the schedules. That being said, we won't be able to offer all of our Los Alamitos high school courses as well. So right now, our goal is to be able, prior to opening enrollment for families, put together that comprehensive list so families will know what they will be able to access when they choose the distance learning option.
I have another question.
Oh,
Because up in the little corner there where it says 20% of the families were interested, that was back when the survey was taken, and now things have kind of changed. And are we anticipating or have we planned for possibly having more than 20%?
So that's been a kind of a common question I guess I've received recently, probably since yesterday, to be fair, or a little more nuanced. Some families have said, are you going to resurvey parents based upon, because they might want to change their answer. And we already told parents, we're not going to hold you to what you voted for back in the end of June. I don't think that we're going to go ahead and resurvey, because here's what we don't believe will occur.
That's not my question.
I know I'm going to get, I wanted, it's only because I'm hearing this from parents, I want to get to that. But no, it'll be open to get to your question, Mrs. Russell. The fact that we offer the a district license as opposed to just 20%, if 9,600, if every single student's family chooses, we could provide that. And so that's why we don't necessarily believe it's going to serve us to resurvey. What we'll need to do is we want to get this out to our community soon. If they want to register for this, that's how we're going to start building our staffing. And then either way, we are still simultaneously planning either our traditional or hybrid model for in-person instruction for those families. So a survey is not going to change the work that we're doing. It'll still be those three models.
I had a quick question. So, this thing's so weird. If the numbers are there, would you be able to offer AP classes?
Absolutely. Our plan is built to offer our standard AP advanced placement courses. It's the singletons that we might not be able to offer. And even then, we've already created a host of problem-solving ways for students that may need to be in a distance learning model to give them other options to complete courses they need if we're not able to offer them. So absolutely.
Thank you.
So continuing with just some information about what's known at this point about Los Al at Home, we do have a dedicated administrator over this TK-12 learning option. And so Dr. Kenneth Lepore, Los Alamitos High School assistant principal, is going to be transitioning to oversee the TK-12 Los Al at Home distance learning program. Los Al at Home teachers will work on site at Los Al schools. So they'll be coming to work every day and teaching from their classrooms to their distance learning students. Our TK-5 elementary classes may have a mix of same grade level students from different elementary schools. So this really is a question I'm getting quite frequently. If I'm a McGaw third grade student, will there only be McGaw third grade students in my Los Al at Home class? And so that's really going to be dependent upon enrollment. Our goal as a school district is to form classes as similar to the traditional school classroom as possible. So if there happen to be 24-ish McGaw third graders that were interested in distance learning, that really works out great for us, and we could have a completely solid third grade McGaw only class in our Los Al at Home program. It could be that you have 10 students from school A and 14 students from school B, and so we'd put those two cohorts of students together with a Los Al teacher to form a grade level class. There's so many possibilities. We have combos in our normal brick and mortar classrooms. You could end up having 10 kinders and 14 first grade students at the same school site and have a K-1 combo. So much like we build our classes at the elementary school during the school year, we'll use those same tenets as we look at the best way to build opportunities for our classroom teachers and our peers to connect with each other in what would be as close to possible as a typical school classroom environment. At our middle school, classes will be comprised of students from both Oak and McAuliffe, and students will be required to log into daily instruction and complete daily work during the time frame of traditional school hours. And there's actually quite a bit of language in the Senate Assembly bill that talks about students who don't show up for virtual instruction as actually being absent for the school day. And so that will be part of the information that we want to get out to our families before they register for Los Al at Home as well. This is like making a commitment to a regular school day. The difference is you're learning at home. So much like you may report to your elementary school at 8 a.m., your class may start at 8:10 a.m. and being prompt, on time, and prepared to learn will be the same expectations in Los Al at Home and being visible on the screen. So I think that's also probably a big change for many students from when we closed for emergency distance learning. Many students did log on and didn't show their face on the Zoom or the Google Meet and really just had that black screen. That won't be acceptable in the distance learning model, Los Al at Home. Teachers need to connect with students. They need to make sure they're learning, check in on them. It's still our responsibility as a school district to look at the general welfare of a student and know that they are safe and healthy every day. And so we need to physically see a student to make that happen. And so more information is coming soon. We know our families have a lot of questions, but we want to make sure that we have good, solid answers and a wide enough team informed about what will be happening to answer those calls, questions, and emails when we do launch our registration process. And so really, just to kind of shut down this idea of Los Al at Home, it really is about all of our students: sea lions, huskies, whales, knights, leos, tigers, eagles, lions, and griffins, all learning at home under one umbrella. our students and their families will still be members of the school community that they regularly attend. They're just choosing for a school year to learn from home. And so we're trying to keep students connected to their school of attendance while participating in the district distance learning program, which is LaSalle at Home. And so, as I've shared, we really have prioritized our work with the remote setting. And now that that work has probably 75% of it been completed, and we're finalizing those final details now that we have an administrator on board, we've really been able to switch and focus our attention both on the traditional setting reopening and the hybrid setting reopening. And so, just to keep the board up to date, since your last update on June 23rd, we've held a total of 10 committee meetings, and we've spent some time educating the committee both on Assembly Bill 77, Senate Bill 98, the California Department of Health COVID-19 industry guidance, schools and school-based programs, as well as the Orange County Together schools reopening checklist and attestation. Those have been the primary documents that we're using to build our reopening school plans here in the district. And so simultaneous to this, Dr. Frazier has also been working with LAEA to meet and really talk about new impacts as we're opening a distance learning platform and how we would look at staffing, evaluation, class size, working expectations of teachers who may be teaching a couple of sections brick and mortar and a couple of sections in the virtual world as well. And so I want to spend a little time updating the board on some of the jargon that you'll be hearing, not only in the news media, but in the documents and planning that will be coming forward to the board. And so one of those really is Assembly Bill 77. So AB 77 really is the 2020 Budget Act, but embedded in that Budget Act was a waiver and a change in required daily instructional minutes for the upcoming school year. And so you can see the current mandate on the left of this column, kindergarten through 12th grade, you'll see an increase from 200 to 360 minutes a day that we currently have to meet the mandate to receive our average daily attendance or count a student as present. For the 2020-21 school year, AB 77 reduces those required daily instructional minutes, and you can see they now range from 180 minutes to 240 minutes, with the goal of this flexibility really being to look at alternate ways to staggered schedules for students to either decrease the number of students on campus or decrease the number of students mitigating and migrating off of campuses at different times of the day.
So Mrs. Reed, this is whether you're doing a virtual option or whether you're doing a more traditional option on campus. These are the minutes that are required by the state.
Absolutely, in all three settings, Mrs. Hill.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And so Senate Bill 98 really was the omnibus trailer bill that was attached to the 2020 Budget Act, and it really, what it did was give provisions to school districts in terms of how they can operate distance learning. And so there are some key components that really guide the work and the framework by which you offer distance learning to students. And so the first one will be that it really calls on local education agencies. It says they shall offer in-person instruction and they may offer distance learning pursuant to the requirements of this part. And so it really outlines under which the stipulations that a school district could offer distance learning in lieu of in-person instruction. It also says that LEAs shall offer in-person instruction to the greatest extent possible. And then it gives strict requirements that have to be satisfied in the distance learning models that include daily live interaction. And then another poignant point when you're thinking about planning your models is it says LEAs shall ensure that a weekly engagement record is completed for each pupil, documenting synchronous or asynchronous instruction for each whole or partial day of distance learning, verifying daily participation and tracking assignments. So it really does put another lens of accountability onto teachers and school districts to really ensure that students were present during live instruction, that they're engaged, that they're participating, and that they're completing work that really are showing progress towards standards that each year. We haven't received the exact guidance of how we will be attesting or accounting to that accountability, but we are anticipating that to come this week. So really, as a committee, what we learned and what shaped some of the decisions and structures that we've put in place initially from these two bills is that districts can offer shorter school days if needed. Districts are called to offer in-person instruction and develop multiple plans of which maximize in-person instruction to the greatest extent possible. Distance learning can count towards the required daily instructional minutes, and that all learning models must include live teaching, so either in person or they must deliver a higher proportionality of synchronous versus asynchronous instruction in any of your blended learning models. And so there is a provision inside 98 as well that says asynchronous can count toward a portion of mandated minutes. So when you're looking at the totality of minutes, a teacher could be live for less than that minutes as long as there is pushed out asynchronous learning that totals the missing components of a student's total required daily instructional minutes. And so what we know is there's going to be great accountability on distance learning. And so as we chose our vendor, as we looked at frameworks, making sure that that's easy for parents and students to understand, as well as our teachers and our district to track and hold ourselves accountable, that was one of the highest priorities that we did look at. Mrs. Catulli?
Mrs. Reed, this is a clarifying question, and you probably just answered it, because it looks like a teacher could spend 50% of their time trying to keep track of students as opposed to actually instruction. So the platform that you guys have researched and say that you think it's the best fit for us takes care of that, or a large part of it?
We believe it takes care of a large part of it.
Okay.
So it has controls on the back end that allow us at the district level, as well as teachers at the teacher level, to monitor and track minutes on assignments, minutes logged on.
Okay.
And so our goal really is partnering with our IT department once we know what these accountability templates look like, to learn how to extract that information in the most efficient way possible, and then provide that to whether it's the county or the state once we get that direction.
Thank you.
And so when
We believe it also communicates with Aries, which is another reason why this
good.
platform, Schools PLP, remember we looked at over 5 different versions, plus
Yeah.
other research that Mrs. Reed and Mrs. Davis did. And just today, when I went over to the IT department to talk with our IT director, the entire IT team was on a webinar with Schools PLP, starting to learn how to get this process integrated with our system. So our strong collaboration, our IT department is already on this as well.
Great, thank you.
In addition, the platform also speaks to Illuminate, which many of you know is our other data and assessment tool that teachers use across the district. So those were both key points in moving towards using Schools PLP, is that we really found it to be the most smoothest transition to support teachers in multiple levels. And so when we talk about greater accountability on distance learning, another change that's happened at the state level is that they have suspended our LCAP, our local control and accountability plan, and in lieu, changed that to the local continuity and attendance plan, which would be due to the board at the end of September. And so that will outline for the board and the community how exactly we are tracking this accountability and learning for students, so that we have a way to measure our success and hold ourselves accountable as well. And so, as I shared earlier, these are the 2 guiding documents that the committee has used. It's the COVID-19 industry guidance from the California Department of Public Health, as well as the Orange County Together Schools Reopening Checklist put out by OCDE. The OCDE checklist really is a great tool for school districts because it really does kind of narrow down the work you should be doing. All of their work was pulled directly from the CDPH guideline, so I kind of think of it as a Cliff Notes version of the CDPH document. And so that Orange County Together Reopening Checklist also comes with a county and school attestation. And so really what that does is schools are going to be required to post it visibly in an entrance point at all school sites, attesting to the measures that they have taken into consideration when planning their reopening plans. And so that attestation is really broken down into 5 areas. You must develop a written worksite plan, provide relevant training for employees and students, plan individual control measures and screening, implement thorough cleaning and disinfecting protocols, as well as promote physical distancing guidelines. And so to help move our plan along, I was able and fortunate enough to meet with all directors on July 11th, student services, food services, FMOT, technology and special education, to include those collaboration points and work from all of our departments that will go into developing our worksite written plans. And so the work really has evolved to looking now that the distance learning model is in place as what will instruction look like on our in-person campuses. And so at this point in time, we're really looking at two options, a traditional option with enhanced safety features, as well as a hybrid reopening. And in both of those possibilities, there are some common planning elements that we've been discussing as a committee. Really the process for symptom screenings and or temperature checks for staff and students, the protocols for face coverings for staff, students, and visitors, as well as signage to remind students, staff, family members, and any authorized visitor to wear a face covering and practice physical distancing, really according to CDPH guidelines and any executive order that may be in place when we reopen schools on August 31st. Talking about routines that would enable students and staff to regularly wash or sanitize their hands at staggered intervals. And so just as an example, our facilities director, CJ Nolan, has been looking for additional sink washing, portable stations that we would purchase to place additionally around our campuses, in addition to students having access to the sinks in their classroom, as well as the sinks in our restroom facilities. We're working with our site administrators to identify directional hallways and passageways for foot traffic that can be identified, clearly marking areas where students, staff, and visitors would queue to maintain physical distancing, like you see at all of our local retailers, and using alternative entry requirements across our campuses to really mitigate the number of people coming into what would typically be maybe a more used entrance or access point. And really limiting non-essential visitors, volunteers, and activities on our school sites. So using an appointment system, staggered appointments, and reducing the walk-ins at our school sites. So how else can we meet the needs of our families, answer their questions, and provide excellent customer service by not having people walk into our offices? So really just being creative about how we can keep great communication with our stakeholders by still reducing the number of adults on our campuses. Mrs. Hill.
Thank you, Mrs. Reed. That was one of the things that I had been reading, is that if we want to have a traditional model, is that it really behooves us to keep as few people as possible on campus. Mm-hmm. And so, but I know our community, and I know that working in a student's classroom is very important to some parents. I know it's very important to the teacher a great deal of the time. And so, did you get a feeling when you were working through this with your committees that teachers understood that may not be an option, that they would have to have that extra help? I'm sure we'll have to work through it with our parents, but I'm sure they'll understand. But how was that with teachers? How did they feel about that?
You know, I think it's very bittersweet, to be honest. So I think when you choose to buy a home here and raise your children in our community, part of what draws you here is our amazing schools and really the dynamic teachers we have in our classroom. And for our parents who are able to come in and get a slice of what that looks like for their student and participate in their school day as a parent, I think really is a gift. And I think our staff, and I know that our parents as well, will understand that when we have to pretty much eliminate our volunteers in a traditional opening, what we have to do is we're just called to find other creative ways to include them. And maybe that's as simple as having parents sign up for read alouds and Zooming them in before recess every day. Maybe that's having the room mom traditionally organize things that could be sent home with students for help to the classroom teacher. So I think we're going to be able to still connect our families to our classrooms. We're just going to have to be creative and unique and really share across school sites what's working. And then really just hope that this all is behind us in a matter of time, and that we're able to once again be all on our campuses. As part of the LoSal family, I know that's something many people look forward to, and I really feel for our incoming kinder families who haven't got to experience that quite yet, but hope that those days will be back for us.
Thank you, Mrs. Reed.
Absolutely. And so one of the things currently that is still being discussed widely is that transportation and busing most likely will not be available to our general population or school sites. Right now, the current direction on a 72-person bus is for 14 students. And so when we look at the routes by law that we're mandated to upkeep with our most challenging and students that may have medical needs and that are in some of our most severe programs, we're required by law to transport those students to and from school, and that is actually written into a legal document, their individualized education plan. And so with the busing fleet that we have, we'll just be able to make that mandate. It would not have, under the current guidelines, the availability to offer busing to the many students who have taken advantage of that in the past. And so that would be both in our traditional and our hybrid reopening, unless, right, the situation is to change, and our Director of Transportation, CJ Nolan, has a great plan that's really set up in tiered intervals. So as phasing guidelines would change, we would phase guidelines into our transportation system as well. And so we're really planning for every possibility at this point. So when we look at our traditional reopening, we're really focused on safety enhancements and our school day modifications. And so these are some of the key components that we're working with in our committee at this point. Staggered start and ending times with designated drop-off and pickup locations with students only on campus, and a modified secondary schedule that would reduce passing periods on our campuses. Staggered recess and lunch, and classroom-only play and designated play zones. So it really comes down to this idea of protecting the classroom teacher and the cohort of students that are almost like a pod on campus. What can we do so that the contact and exposure is just within that self-contained unit? So that really is keeping our classrooms intact as cohorts and keeping them together through recess and through lunch. And so designating, for an example, a play yard up into the field, blacktop, where classroom 1 may have the field today, classroom 2 is going to play on the blacktop. And so really putting systems in place to mitigate contact points across multiple students.
I will say that that's not new for us. So while again, we were one of the few, I think the only initially in Orange County that continued to provide daycare during the school closures after March, we were able to keep our kids who were in daycare in stable cohorts. And so just those 8 kids, however many it was, they could only be together. They went out to lunch, they went to use the play yard, whatever it was just within the, and we found great success with that. So while we think that this is a doable model for us.
This was also the same model that we deployed in opening up our athletics programs. And so we do know that it's doable. We do know that it's doable to check in students, to check their temperatures, to do a lot of things very quickly, cohort our students, and also provide an opportunity for them to socially engage with peers. And so really the idea is that students remain in the same space and group, and we minimize the movement of students and teachers and staff across the campus. As Dr. Pulver shared earlier, we have purchased a desk shield for every student in the district. So we will be using desk shield to provide a partition and barrier between desks when we're not able to maintain that 6 feet of distance. We will also be having our desk arranged facing forward, teachers' desks at least 6 feet apart from the students, as well as removing non-essential furniture from our classrooms. So I think our classrooms are absolutely stunning and lovely, and our teachers have gone above and beyond, especially in our elementary classrooms, to make our classrooms mini versions of home with flexible furniture and reading nooks and extra bookcases and bean bags. But unfortunately, we feel it's best to start this school year with removing all of the additional stuff that takes up space in our classroom and really focusing on spreading out our classroom desks as much as possible. And so it will look a little different inside of our classrooms, but you know what? It never was about our buildings. It's always been about what happens inside the classrooms, and that will still be top notch.
So how do they move, how does the secondary move with the dividers? Do they take their divider with them, or are they cleaned between?
So we actually looked at about 8 different samples of this, and we don't think it's feasible for students to transport these. So that's why we ended up buying one for every single student. But really, they'll just be left within the classroom. Initially, we thought we liked the design that had clear sides on all 3 sides, and the more we thought about it, once you start, if you have to clean it every period, let's say, if it's at the secondary level, you're not going to start to see very well. So with this, these are sturdier, they're more durable, and hopefully we're going to have to teach kids not to touch the front part. And if you're just wiping down these side parts, then this will last much longer. We're also, and Mrs. Reed will share a little bit some of the other things we're trying to consider at the high school and secondary level. Block scheduling or other things to limit the number of passing periods and the number of students within a classroom within one day. Again, we're having to work through those with our staff as well.
And so that is one of the things that we are considering at the secondary level when we look at that first bullet, modified secondary schedule. That's not only to reduce passing periods, it also reduces the number of students that come into a classroom environment on each day, and reduces on the amount of cleaning in between each period as well as students leave spaces. So it really has multiple wins for us when we look at a traditional reopening with increased safety enhancements. We're also looking at creating outdoor teaching and learning spaces. And so our director of facilities, CJ Nolan, has also been pivotal. They've already put up a temporary version of what could be an addition to our outdoor spaces by using about a 30-foot tarp that comes out from the side of our buildings and can be added in multiple places across our school sites to create shade structures where tables can be placed outside, so that we're really utilizing that outdoor learning space that both the CDPH and OC attestation call for as great substitutes for an indoor space. And so
CJ is working with DSA to make sure. DSA organizes any permitting for our school districts. They're willing to work with districts as long as these are temporary structures and not permanent structures, and having our structural engineers still take a look at them. So it is something that CJ is actively working on.
And Dr. Pulver, have we, I know that there's been I've done a lot of reading on hemp filters and how those are better for circulating air. Do we have an opportunity to look at that within the classroom or not?
So we change our air conditioning filters on a very routine basis. I'm not sure if they're the hemp filters. I'm almost positive that they are, but the one thing we do know, they are not recirculated air. So our air conditioning units constantly pull in the fresh air, and it doesn't recirculate, which is one of the recommended features as well. However, in the past, we've tried to encourage people, if you're air conditioning, close your doors, and we'll probably will be sending a mixed message this next year. Keep the doors open and keep the air conditioning on.
That'll be an increase in our electricity.
I'll let CJ answer the other part about the filters.
Okay.
He'll have more expertise than me.
Yeah, so we've been actively working with West Group, one of our architecture firms, has been very helpful in some of the mechanical concerns with HVAC in terms of our COVID concerns, and we've been developing a plan to keep air circulating, and we're weighing in the option of those filters, but we're trying to time it with our annual changing of the filters.
Thank you, CJ.
Thank you.
As you can see, a lot of thought is going into all these plans.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So really our traditional reopening, ultimately, we're also working with our administrators with the ultimate goal of minimizing contact between students, staffs, families, and the community. So that's also going to be things like a virtual back to school night. So in lieu of coming onto campus and spending time inside your child's classroom, parents would be logging on to a virtual back to school night. As remember, the goal really is to protect the classroom environment for the students that are assigned there and the classroom teacher. And so when we move to a hybrid reopening, that really is, for those who are unfamiliar with it, it's a blend. It's in-person instruction and distance learning. And so we've really spent our time investigating multiple models. You'll see so many models out there. The AM/PM model, where elementary students, half of the group A of a cohort comes in the morning and the other half of the class comes in the afternoon. You'll see really prevalent in secondary campuses, 2-day in-class, 3-day online swap. So the first week, Group A may have 2 days in class and 3 days online, and the next week they have 3 days in class or 3 days online. You'll see models that are 2-2-1. All students have 2 days a week in class and 1 day of asynchronous learning, where teachers have time on 1 day to collaborate, to curate their asynchronous learning in videos, as well as plan, right, for two cohorts of students who are coming for that in-person instruction. And you'll see models with a dedicated team distance teacher. So where at a grade level, 2 or 3 teachers may take in the in-person students, and 1 teacher is then dedicated to providing the distance learning for all students at that grade level in a hybrid model. So this really is the work that we continue to do. We have 4 meetings scheduled for the rest of this week, where we're really drilling down at the TK5, 6, 8, and 9, 12 level to look at what models would benefit our students and our families, and we really are trying to be cognizant of the strain that this could put potentially on families who would have students at different levels in different cohorts and different models, and taking into consideration what we can do in terms of, we had close to 40% of our families at the elementary level share with us the need for childcare during the school day. And so when you're in a hybrid model, you're using all of your classrooms and all of your non-instructional spaces for teaching points, and so it leaves limited availability other than outdoor space to be able to provide childcare in that model. So we're really trying to look big picture at how we can best serve and support our students, their parents, as well as our teaching staff. And so,
And what is the benefit to having a hybrid model as opposed to having having a traditional model and having an online model?
So in a large part, I'll answer and then I'll let Mrs. Reed. The only way to reach 6 feet of social distancing in a classroom is to do a hybrid. And so you would have to, in a typical classroom, they can probably have it varies, but up to about 18 to 16 students and still keep the 6 feet social distancing. And so the CDPH guidelines say, provide social distancing where feasible, and if it's not feasible, then consider using these types of desk shields that create another barrier between students. So in a traditional model, we may not have a full 6 feet of social distancing. We'll maximize the social distancing, and then we've added this layer to allow that. But if we had to do a model that had that social distancing, that's why you have to look at a hybrid, because you're decreasing the number of students and humans in the building at one given time.
So because I've also, as we all have done our reading and research, and a lot of the American Academy of Pediatrics says that it can be 3 to 6 feet of social distancing that for children would be acceptable. So one of my concerns is that if anybody has listened to this presentation and the amount of work that Mrs. Reed has gone through, and her staff and your staff, and that they have been working through to provide these models, I'm just asking the question of, do we think that the restrictions will be so defined that they will have to be 6 feet apart, and that we will have to provide this as I just don't, I feel that Mrs. Reed is doing, and everybody is doing so much work to get to where our community will have good options for our students. To me, it seems like the hybrid model that would be a model if we were mandated to have 6 feet. Is that correct?
That is correct. Right now, it's not mandated. Again, in the guidelines, it says where feasible, and then when it's not, consider these other options to create more layers of protection for that. That being said, I think we all know the goalposts since March 13th have changed back and forth constantly. And so that's why when we started off this conversation, I did share that the one thing we know for certain is things will change in this process, and we're going to have to be adaptive, and that the governor has said they may be releasing new guidelines. I'm told that LA, they have different health, their cases are different too, so their healthcare agency has released more stringent guidelines, and so it is going to be more difficult for some districts in LA to meet those guideline thresholds. It's just going to largely be dependent upon that, as well as the work with our associations to ensure that we can also make sure our staff feel safe and comfortable to be able to come and deliver instruction to our students in that process. So it's going to be a marriage of both of those things, I think.
And when do you think, any idea when we might have
Well, Mrs. Reed's going to share our timeline. We're going to have plans for both. So one of the things we want to be able to do is we have a fully planned hybrid and a fully planned traditional, because even let's say you start off hybrid and you get to move to traditional, or vice versa, we get to start off traditional and have to move into a hybrid. We want to have everything ready and have a smooth plan that we can be nimble. And as a smaller school district, we have that ability much more than other districts that are much larger. And as a unified district where we really get to kind of chart the course for our students, TK, really even preschool, because even our preschool programs are looking at these models all the way through 12th grade, and even our adult transition. And so we're wanting to have fully developed plans for all of these.
And so I think you did shed light on a really challenging point, Mrs. Hill, and that planning a hybrid is challenging. It's not undoable, it's challenging. And so it's one of the reasons why we put it last as well, is hoping to learn from other districts, see what plans they've put out, a lot of developed thinking. You're looking at multiple factors, as well as potentially decreasing the school day for students in a hybrid model. Because you have to think about the teacher. They're planning the full brick and mortar instruction lesson, and then they have students not at school that day that they also have to prep and prepare distance learning for. And so in an AM/PM model, for example, the teacher's full school day has students and 2 packs, and so they also have additional minutes that they haven't made that will have to be planned remote in addition to the 2 groups that day to meet even the lesser new version of the mandated minutes for 2020-21, as well as the child care, the multiple schedules across the district for our families, and the no busing at this point. And so by no means is there one answer to any of this, and so that's why we have engaged so many staff members to continually problem solve and look at this from really every angle possible, because we want to put out what is the best possible scenario for our students, regardless if it's traditional or in a hybrid setting. And so part of that work also is work behind the scenes with our partner, ARIES, which is part of our student information system. And so we're looking at the best ways to potentially group our student body for the hybrid schedule. I've spoken to a lot of my colleagues in other districts who have looked at this by birth date, by grade, by last name. And even if 20% of our students come off campus, we're looking at about 2,500 students on campus. Nearly impossible to guarantee even families to be in the same cohort of schedules, because students take so many different leveled classes that exist in our master schedule in multiple ways. And although your first period could be at even 50-50 as you traverse a second period, that may not exactly be a 50-50, and it could be a 60-40 or 70-30. So it really is nuanced at every level. And so it's going to take all of us to make a great decision at our school site teams and our district team. And so part of that right now, additionally, is we're planning the staff training for our over 400 teachers on the school's PLP learning management system and digital resources, because we will need to have that up and running before the first day of school. We're determining the viability of offering childcare in the hybrid model. We're removing non-essential classroom furniture to create more space in both models. And then, as I've shared before, we're really working not only as an elementary, middle, and high school team, but as a unified TK-12 team to look at the impact of these schedules across district levels for our families.
And I'll just share in terms of childcare. So as you've heard us say, that in a hybrid model, just about every classroom will be utilized, barring however many number of kids go into the virtual. And so one of the things we may have to do, just to try to ensure that we can provide an opportunity for staff who have young kids themselves, is we may have to, if we only have 3 rooms available for childcare, we may have to prioritize childcare for our staff. Of course, it'd still be staff would pay for it like any other parent would, but that they would have priority access, because we would need to make sure that our staff have the ability for childcare so that they can provide the service for the entire community. And so that's not lost on us either, that's something we have to consider.
So I had a quick question. So with the hybrid and the childcare, ultimately that childcare time is supposed to be part of a student's instruction time. So if I put my second grader, maybe have to be my grandchild, second grader into childcare, that would be part of his or her instruction time, right? Because
not if it's not provided by a certificated staff member. So if you have classified staff, which is typically who runs our Kids Corner and our EDCC programs, that does not count as instructional time, because that's a classified staff member. That's childcare. So it's really clear in SB 98 that for instructional minutes to count, it must be by provided by a certificated staff member.
How would they
What
get
if they
it?
were doing some of the asynchronous
They could.
childcare?
So in part of a distance learning, if students were in childcare and they're logging on to our school's PLP system to a unit, a certificated member has pushed out, and we're just getting support to complete that, that would count. But not just being enrolled in childcare doesn't count as the instructional
Seems
minutes.
impossible. I think that's a very difficult part of the whole thing, is that's important instructional minutes for those children.
And we found that for when we offered childcare and when schools closed, that our extended daycare staff had to be knowledgeable of when students could log on to their Chromebook, with this teacher schedule, with that teacher schedule, because they were doing that during the day while parents were at work. And so they would be able to do that. It would be during the asynchronous portion, not the live instruction with the teacher.
And so really, as we look ahead to the start of our 2020-21 school year, at this point, our planning is to offer 2 options to family: an on-campus instruction option, and that's not chosen or clearly defined at this time. What we're clearly exploring is a traditional school model with safety enhancements, or a hybrid model where we would try to get our goal to be as close as we could to 50% in-person and 50% distance learning. And then the other option for families would be to enroll mostly at home, which would be a 100% distance learning model.
Okay. Mrs. Reed, by the time our parents need to make the decision between brick and mortar and distance learning, will the decision have been made whether it's going to be hybrid or traditional? Because that is definitely going to affect people's decision.
I believe we'll open up registration before our decision will be made.
Okay.
So our earlier survey did indicate that many families, regardless of how we would open, would choose our distance learning model. I also believe our distance learning enrollment would continue into when we make our decision of how we will
the
open.
registration will open, it won't necessarily close.
Okay, all right.
But for those, there are a group of parents, and you've
yes.
received several emails already, so have I, who've already made it clear that's what they want.
That's what they
We've
want.
also received several emails from parents who want the left side of this, which is traditional and or hybrid, but really begging you to provide a traditional setting with enhanced safety protocols, et cetera.
Right.
And so for those that know, it just helps us to start getting the staffing and the course
Yeah.
Figured out.
I totally understand it. And I think I basically asked the question because I wanted anybody listening would know that if they decided to do this early, they were committing for it the full school year without us having made our final brick and mortar decision on how school will progress.
And I think when we open up, I'm going to make this up right now. So let's say we had a 2-week opening for registration to LoSal at home, and that first week our families didn't know what the options were for in-person. And then during that second week they did know, and we had some families early on who registered. They would be able to pull out and choose that in-person, but we would have our drop dead date by which you had to be locked in to our distance learning model so that we could appropriately staff it, and even more importantly at the 6-12 level, start to make that master schedule and offer as many classes as possible that mirror the images of our student schedule.
Right. Great. Thank you.
My question deals with, if it deems to be best to have the hybrid model, would parents still be able to opt for 100% virtual? Yes, okay.
Yeah, so in both opportunities, distance learning 100% is an option for families.
Then if we open in a hybrid model and then later on becomes clear during the year that it's safe to fully open to traditional, we could totally adopt that. Is that true?
Yes. And that's why we're developing all 3 plans fully so that they're available in that moment that we need to revert to them. Mr. Boyer?
I guess in the Orange County School Boards Association meetings I've been on, and Meg's been there too, and she and I talked about this last Friday, one of the big concerns it seems to be around the county that I'm hearing from other board members is, what about staff? You know, we have some staff that won't be comfortable in a hybrid model or in the classroom. And have we done anything, and what other districts have been doing apparently have been surveying employees, because I don't want employees to be at risk. There are those at a risk. And so for those that are to make a commitment so that we can know how to plan appropriately, have we done any of that work to see who's willing to come back in the classroom, who's not willing, who could maybe Zoom into an elementary school classroom and have a student teacher there in the classroom to however we want to do it. I mean, we're going to be flexible. Have we done that work to figure out where we're at?
Survey that, or similar, I should say, never exactly the same, but We surveyed our families and asked them the different models of a traditional, of a hybrid, of a distance learning, face
Right.
coverings, et cetera, childcare issues.
Right.
Is that going to be a we did the same
Kind of did it
the
with
same
staff,
survey with our staff as well.
But we don't really have a commitment. We kind of surveyed, but we don't have a, like, I definitely will go in the classroom. We don't have a for sure from
No, because
staff.
we needed to educate our staff too on what
Right.
being a distance learning teacher would look like as you make that commitment. Because I think that initially many thought that could be working from home like it was for
Right.
emergency distance learning. Maybe that would be, many charter schools have complete asynchronous programs, so there is no live teaching. So we need to make sure before our teachers make a commitment, much like our families,
Right.
they're educated on what those
It's-
working expectations are.
It's a very fluid thing, and I just see how it's not going to match up perfect like classroom size, right?
And so really, as we wrap this up, our upcoming work is this week for the next 2 weeks, we have our additional traditional hybrid and committee planning. We also have continuing to meet with our special education committee planning as those unique needs of students with disabilities. Also, we take a separate lens at looking at how we can best serve that population of students. We're going to continue our collaboration with facilities, purchasing technology, student services, and site administrators. As you can imagine, we're not the only people in the marketplace looking for many of these products, and so time is of the essence. We're drafting our district reopening plan as well as our OC attestation and our learning continuity and attendance plan coming out of Ed Services. And then ultimately, the most pivotal part is the communication with our district staff and our parent community about how we'll be reopening. And so I'm going to kind of quickly wrap up the timeline. As you know, tonight we're making our vendor recommendation. Between July 13th and 24th, we're going to be finalizing our draft plan. Our hope is that July 27th through the 31st, we'll be finalizing our traditional hybrid plan, opening up enrollment for LOSL at Home with some informational materials to families so they know what that would look like and what the commitment is. Because as you can imagine, with a student learning 100% from home, there's going to be a part of our some parent expectations in terms of support in making this work with us. And then the week of August 3rd through the 7th, we're hoping to communicate out our final reopening plans in terms of what we'll be offering in our traditional classrooms, as well as continue our virtual schooling enrollment. The work really gets heavy for us after that as students choose distance learning or in person because there's some major staffing shifts, master schedule changes, teacher and student trainings that must be matched up, and so it really will be a very intense 2-week prior to our school doors opening this school year. And so I'd just like to thank the board for your time. I know it's a lot of information. And I also want to take an opportunity in closing to thank our teaching staff. So they are just absolutely spectacular in every sense of the word. The number of hours they've given this summer to meet. We facilitate these meetings in person and via Zoom. So it's really a hybrid facilitation of our committee meetings. And so the amount of hours, it absolutely amazes me how many of them show up and are positive and willing to come and give us just great input as we make these final recommendations. So I just want to give them a public thank you for that.
And I know I'm speaking on behalf of the entire board. We cannot thank you, your staff, all of our teachers. This is not reinventing a wheel. This is creating a wheel that has to turn around and isn't shaped in a circle. And the amount of effort you guys are putting in reflects the standards, the love, the passion, and the commitment we have to all of our students in LaSalle. So please let all of the people who've helped work on this, all the different departments, that I am so proud of our staff. And I know, like I said, all the board members are. And thank you so much for doing such outstanding work.
Absolutely, thank you.
I echo that, and it's things that we don't even think about. Our purchasing department, Brian, has been spectacular to work with, even trying to get the vendors for the different materials that we think that we need to purchase, along with facilities, et cetera. So one of the things we will be doing, we plan on communicating out to families a brief summary of where we are and the 2 options that families will have. So we're looking to send something out either by the end of this week or early next week. We'll clip our board workshops from the 3 that we've had to just be just these. So already IT has been able to do that for us, and we'll embed those as well for our families, because as you can see, there's much more nuance in the discussion than just a simple email can communicate. But for families that couldn't, they'll be able to view that as well. So we'll be sending that out again either the end of this week or early next. And I do think that we can do our next workshop. I know that took a little bit of time, but CJ and Dr. Deanne, I think, can do this in probably about 15 minutes, because most of this you've been well informed on. It's just highlighting some of the facility projects that we've been working on, and a very short update on the solar.
Okay, before we start, I noticed that we have people, community members in audience. And when I opened the meeting, we had no cards. I don't know if anybody else wanted to speak. Did you fill out a card? We need to have you fill out a card. They're out in the foyer. And so what we can do is wait until, and call you up after CJ does his presentation. But I didn't want you to think that we were ignoring you, but you weren't here when we started. I like to start on time.
Madam
Because we always
President,
go over.
Madam President, honorable members of the board, it's good to be back to update you guys on our projects that we've been working on. It's been so long, I forgot we have a clicker. I first wanted to hit on some of the COVID-19 safety measures that we're implementing on all of our construction projects. So this is taken an effect on multiple aspects of how we operate as a district. Each contractor that we have working on our district has submitted a COVID-19 safety plan that has been reviewed and approved by the district. These safety measures include daily temperature monitoring, face mask requirements, virtual meetings, and document reviews. As we build things, we have to review documents as in a collaborative manner. So much like teaching, we have to have virtual meetings and a virtual space to review these documents. Social distancing protocols, and this includes for office spaces for our inspectors, our managers, and our supervisors, and any other administrative staff on the projects. So the first project I wanted to bring us back up to speed on was the Los Alamitos High School multi-story STEM building. It may not look like it, but a lot of work has progressed over the last 3 to 4 months since I've last been able to give the board an update. We've been able to complete all of our underground utilities, which for the most part included gas and water, because a lot of our electrical infrastructure was completed through the infrastructure project. So we removed all of those outside of the building footprint so that in the future, if we have to make a repair, we don't have a 3-story building sitting on top of a line that we have to repair. Now that all of those are sitting on the outside, we're arranging our contracts with the city and Golden State Water to do those final connections into the city's utility line, so that our new building will have a new direct line for water and fire water. Soil stabilization activities have begun. As you guys are well aware, we don't have the best soil in our district. Being located next to the ocean, a lot of times we're lucky to have a 14-foot water table, and that's on a good day. Some areas we have a 7-foot water table. So due to the soil conditions, we have to go above and beyond to remediate the soil and stabilize it so that we're able to place a structure there that's going to last more than 50 years. Some of the soil stabilization that we do includes rammed aggregate piers, concrete piers. On this project right now, prior to us placing the rammed aggregate piers, we have to compact the soil to a 95% threshold, which is pretty compact and dense. We were not able to achieve that with the soil in its native condition. So the contractor proposed a $300,000 allowance request, which would utilize base, and the district was able to go with our design team and develop a system where we would use a concrete soil mixing. That was only a $60,000 allowance expenditure. So that resulted in an approximate $240,000 savings for the district, and it achieves a greater compactness of soil as well because it mixes the concrete. So we're actively, as things progress, trying to mitigate any cost impacts that may occur throughout the project. Just to highlight what's going to be happening over the next couple weeks, we're going to be starting our rammed aggregate piers now that We've stabilized the soil, and that drilling should be starting this week and next week.
CJ, do you think that will be completed before children are on campus?
That's the goal. That's the goal. It might overlap a week or two, but right now, per our schedule, we should be finishing. But with construction, I hate to give that give that deadline. Yeah, things seem to always change. The next project, our aquatic center at the high school, it looks a lot different since I last updated you. We have a pool full of water. Things have come along really, really well over the last few weeks. With the pool, the last construction activities tighten up and they finished relatively quickly. So the project overall is substantially complete, and we're identifying punch list items and we're completing those in a rapid fashion. The Orange County Health Department's final inspection has actually, since I wrote this, has moved up to the 17th of July. So we're actively trying to expedite everything as fast as possible. The health department reviews several different items, and they give us the final clearance for the first cannonball into the pool. The asphalt portion was completed today around the perimeter of the pool. And like I said, with a lot of these activities, it's sometimes a struggle with our contractor to get them to wrap up within their contract time. So we're identifying items that we can self-perform as a district and recover costs from the contractor through a deductive change order process. So you can also see our shade structures are installed, our bleachers are installed.
It's so pretty. It really
The
is.
architect did a really, really good, they did an amazing job at matching the aesthetic with the new building to our existing gym. It blends really nicely. And one of the things that I'm working with the site and incorporating is privacy, like vision banners that would go along the fence on the back side and on the left side behind the bleachers, so you're not looking at the back side of the modular classroom buildings. Hopkinson and Los Alamitos Elementary School modular restroom buildings. So these two projects have been going in tandem, and they have a contract completion date for August 5th, because originally as we're designing a project, that was when school was going to be resuming. We're still on schedule to be finishing the bulk of these projects by August 5th. I believe Hopkinson will be 100% done. Los Alamitos, because of the parking lot and several other more involved portions of the project, we might extend a little bit past the 5th. But if we have that leeway, we're going to take full advantage of it. So the modular buildings have arrived and they have been installed onto their concrete foundations. The contractor is currently doing the brick veneer and the plaster work on the buildings, so they will be a permanent structure of the campus. You can make out the concrete foundation on the picture on the left. Right there, that's where it sits, and it sits flush just like every other building on the campus. Once the plaster and the brick veneer is installed on the outside of the modular restroom buildings, the contractor will come in and do the asphalt work up to the building and kind of tighten it up to the rest of the campus. Los Alamitos Elementary School asphalt parking lot improvements. So we did receive a stop order from DSA on this project due to some accessibility concerns on the project. We've been actively meeting with DSA for the last 2 weeks, I want to say, trying to resolve this issue. We had a very productive meeting with them yesterday. And West Group has stepped in and has been doing an amazing job kind of coordinating the whole process, where right now we have a submission date scheduled for Monday at 10 a.m. with DSA, and they've agreed to return drawings by Tuesday, the next day, so we could proceed with asphalt work on Wednesday. So right now we finally have that kind of path or light at the end of the tunnel through this process, it's been a stress for me this summer, which I'm not used to. But we're finally seem to be making a lot of headway and getting towards the path of resolution.
And it will be completed before school starts on August 3rd.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's kind of important to have a parking lot functioning in an elementary
How much
school.
more money did DSA want? That's my question.
I'll have to provide that at the next update.
It's all about the money.
Yeah.
It really is. You see some concerns like that popping up. But overall, we're doing everything we can to mitigate costs, and we'll definitely have to enumerate those towards the end. These are some of our smaller deferred summer projects that really at the end of this summer, I plan on bringing a lot more pictures and kind of highlighting some of the work that we're doing. But the carpet at the 2-story building at the high school has not been replaced in a lot of those rooms since I believe it was built, which is over 15 years, I want to say. So we are replacing the entire building's carpet. So we'll be able to remove that off of the modernization requirements for the upcoming modernization. So the goal is to do entire buildings or sections so that we can knock off some of the scope required of the modernization when we get to that point through our bond. We've also done some asphalt rework at Rossmore Elementary School and Lee Elementary School. I just didn't have that on here. Where we were able to slurry and put a new seal coat on there, on the asphalt. On the HVAC controls at the district office and the high school. So these are they're new thermostats which will help us be more energy efficient through the application of the turning on and off of our HVAC units as a whole. It also guarantees the circulation of the units, and it has additional sensors where they're able to be remotely monitored to turn on or off in the event, in case we have an event like say a user group rents the gym or something like that, and they need to turn the AC on. We'll be able to do that remotely. So we also were able to complete a decorative fountain at McGaw that was donated by I believe by their PTA, and have that installed as well.
Thank you so much. I am going to update on the solar portion, just really about the EV charger, as that was one of the components that was being asked to reviewed. So this is a little small, hard to see, but on the top headings, you will have the different energy cost comparison in different options. So this is the exact dollar amount, but let's go to the summary. I think it's much easier to see it here. Our district goal when we are looking at solar is to save money, and we're looking at a model of to save between $12 million to about almost $15 million in the 30 years in this model. So in the blue tiles, as you will see here, this is how much the district would pay for solar without EV chargers. So this is from year 1 to 30, and as you will see, the individual years, the payments are in the previous slide. If we were to add 2 EV chargers at the high school, the additional cost would be $154,000 over the 30-year period. If we were to do 2 EV chargers at at the sites with the solar parking lots, and those are the district office, LAE, the high school, McAuliffe, McGaw, and Oak. So that would be a total of 12 EV chargers. The additional cost would be $670,000. And if we were to do 2 EV chargers at every single site, that would be a 9 sites plus the DO, that would be then the cost would be about $1.1 million. So these are additional costs that will be on top of the rate that we would pay.
And again, just reminding, an EV charger is the charger you would use to charge a electric vehicle.
So each EV charger can be, each post can charge 2 vehicles at the same time. But just as a, I did talk to Mike Beverly from PFMG. I was like, well, you guys have done, a lot of work in school districts in California. They've done 32, they work with 32 school districts. They've only had one district that installed the EV chargers, and that was the Antelope Valley Union High School District. And it's it's a high school district. It's a little bit different when you only have high schools. And so we don't have to decide on this right away. We can always wait prior to installation, but we do have to decide which plan at some point we do want to enter into a contract. And so we can always adjust the contract prior to them to do that. One of the things about EV charging is it's a separate contract than the contract from PFMG. So it will be a separate, so they would help us to bring it in, and as part of the bringing in is the first 3 years, you'll be part of kind of the contract, but after that, the district, we would have to maintain that and to have a separate contract with whatever company that we would select. So that will be something outside of the contract from PFMG. So if something goes wrong, things like that, the district will be responsible to repair those. So that's one of the concerns that we have. So given the additional cost for EV charger and the additional different things, additional contract, and if it even matches with what our system and all of that, we are not recommending to install the EV charging station at this time. Obviously, prior to December, before we order any of those systems, we can add that, or we can even add that a little bit later. But at least at this point, we wanted to see, because we do want to lock in the price. We would have to select a price, and the price that we recommended to the board last time was the flat rate. Okay, oh, I'm sorry, Karen.
I was the one, I think, that originally asked if that might be a possibility. I didn't realize how much the cost was going to be.
We didn't.
It's good to have the information.
Exactly, and so we wanted to make sure we bring it back here to talk about it, and we didn't know how much it would be without, maybe it was a little bit here or not, but.
And a question for me, Nancy, is just like when we've done projects before, as we do things, is there a way to plumb our projects so that if we want to, if you decide 10 years from now, hey, there's a great deal, we can get EV vehicles for the district, and it makes sense that we can install them. Is there a way to plumb it so that we can do that, CJ, that we can, without having to spend a bunch more money when they put in for a little bit of cost, maybe to give us the option down the road?
Yeah.
So with the high school, with the infrastructure project, we 100% do have that ability. As we
Michael
upgrade,
shared at our last workshop that they could plumb and for it.
I remember
we
him saying
thought,
that.
yeah.
So if we could do that, I think that gives you the option down the road,
Yeah.
based on like we did with
Right.
like liquid gas with the buses. We got the over the
we would
years.
place an extra conduit down when we're doing the solar.
So as long as we have the option down the road,
Yes, we do have that option, and obviously different companies, and then there's things, for example, how much do we set the rate, and do all those things, and do we charge? I mean, obviously, it should not. We're trying to do this to save money, not to incur
Right.
cost.
No, I
So
agree.
that's one of the considerations we have. Thank you. And this is just the timeline of what is to come. So we are now at this point, July, and so we wanted to update the EV charger information right now. The contract will come to the board at the next meeting. We are doing a ticket, has to be posted 2 weeks prior, is through the 4217 goal. That's the energy project that we are allowed to take through that. Then in September will be the real estate due diligence. It's really, we're working with the sites and to determine what is the best location. I mean, CJ already started doing that process, but we want to make sure that we determine the exact location. And there will be community outreach. So even given this kind of time, so we've been talking with PFMG to see what different ways can we actually do this. So we have to be a little bit more creative to do this kind of option at this point. October, then the district would sign off on the where the location, and then they would then start to do the design portion. November, continue to the design, and then December, we have to order the solar modulars at this point. You just have to order them. They don't have to be in here, but in order for the district to receive the tax credit. And it will take about 12 to 18 months at this point to complete the project. So assuming, January of 2020, so whenever, 2021, then the project could start. That's
Does
assuming.
the community outreach time period allow for, if you find that there's some blowback or unhappiness about where you're planning on positioning them, is there time to redesign that? Can we be responsive to the community?
Yes, yes, I mean, definitely. So that's one of the things, yeah. So I think we just have to, plan for, see how.
So from talking with PFMG, it would be a more interactive type of meeting, community outreach, where we would try to discuss solutions to the problems there. We wouldn't have, if it as required, we would schedule more community outreach with that group should it be needed, but we would be trying to actively resolve concerns at each.
And I did notice that it was on the front page of the News Enterprise, I believe. Did we get any response or phone calls from that?
None.
Thank you.
Okay. And I just want to reiterate that we're not using bond money for this, but it has to do with the solar company getting part of the energy that we are producing. And we will also get a discount on the electricity that we're using.
Yes, so, and actually, the way that we're doing this, we are going to have flat rate for the next 30 years at 16.4 cents.
Right.
And so that makes it very, very attractive for us to do that. So we're basically locking the rate. I mean, the values you will see is net present value. So, but you do project it for 30 years. I mean, and so there is a discounted based on the pricing already at that point. So I think it's wise to, because the tax credit is still very, very good right now. If you wait another, year, you're not going to have the same tax credit.
There is no upfront cost to the district. The district will not spend a dime on this. What we're doing is, instead of contracting to pay our electrical bills through Edison, we're paying our electricity bills through the solar company, and any remaining through Edison, and it locks our rate in. So we have a guaranteed rate for 30 years. And so that's how we reach that it really could yield a savings between 12 and almost $15 million is because of that. So that's the thing that's attractive in this model, is that it doesn't cost any district dollars to be able to save these funds.
It'd be nice when we're having our doors open and air conditioning on if we had it.
And so that concludes the presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions, and also we're assuming we needed some direction for the EV charging, assuming that we are not going to do that at this point. We will ask them to make available the conduit so that in the future, if the district chooses to do that, then we have the option as well.
Yeah, just, is that the direction the board wants to go, as opposed to actually pay? Yeah, I agree with Mrs. Russell. I could not, when I saw that, I went, I'm in the wrong business, Okay.
Well, we don't have any.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe we do have a member from the community who wanted to address the board. We do need to go into closed session. I hate to rush. Yeah, thank you. I give it to Ms. D'Angelo. Go up to the podium. Let her wipe it before you get up there. Yeah, we need to keep that as part of our legal records for the minutes. And then the
as
board
normal,
will be
just the
going
3
into
minutes, and
closed
we'll-
session, and we'll come back again at 6:30 in the evening to resume the board meeting again. And while Ms. D'Angelo is sanitizing, we have Dr. Lepore in the audience, and I want to thank him for taking over the distance learning part of the high school, because that has so many moving parts. Thank you so much for accepting that job, and I know you'll do a fantastic job at it. Thank you.
And just to clarify, it will be the distance learning for TK-12, not just.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh, TK-12? That's even more time. Okay, so I have Christine McRae.
Yes.
Okay, please come and address the board.
Hello, I'm a parent. I have an incoming 6th grader to McAuliffe. Want to say thank you for the great work for the flexible plan. It's wonderful to see the thoughtfulness and that you're providing alternatives, following state guidelines, county guidelines, and really thinking about both the safety of the students and of the staff. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Farnaz, did you want to address us? Yes. I guess I should say your full name, Pardesani.
Okay, hello. Well, first and foremost, I want to thank everyone for having this forum and explaining to us the complexities and the challenges that we have in front of us. It feels really wonderful and transparent to be able to see all the work that's been done. So thank you, and kudos to you. I do have 3 questions. I made some notes, so let me refer to them. First and foremost, I wanted to understand, so what are the protocols for infection in the event that a student gets infected or a teacher gets infected or a parent or a sibling of a student gets infected? What are the protocols that you have put in place?
So normally during the public comment, it's really not a dialogue back and forth, but I'll be able to address some of the questions once you're done.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So thank you. So then the other question that I had is, thank you for explaining that, is, in terms of if there's going to be in-person teachers, have we thought about, or is there any planned training for them to also learn to be virtual learning teachers? And if that is the case, is there a plan? Because, given how things are so fluid and changing rapidly, as we start a traditional or a hybrid model, if we have to go to virtual, is there any type of training that we're providing to teachers for that? And my last question is that if, given that, we're trying to have safe distance in the classrooms, has there been a change in the ratio of student to teachers? If you could help touch on that as well at some point. And those are my questions. Thank you.
So I think they're all under our agenda topics. I'd be happy to address those questions for the community and the board. The protocols for COVID testing are going to be outlined in our plan. That is, I would say, the one area that the guidance documents, both the counties and California's, is lacking. It says create a plan. And so it's not very detail oriented. I've had the great pleasure of looking at a few other county models and other school districts who've created certain plans. So I think it's the San Luis or Santa Clara County Office of Education and the Department of Public Health that have a lot of detailed information on what to do if a student tests, if you think just a student has symptoms, if a staff member, et cetera. And so we are studying that already. I know some districts that have had some students test or report positive during the summer while they had summer school or other options. Right now, the guidance is you call the county and you follow the county public health care. Your time's up, Farnaz. Maybe I don't know how to stop this thing. There we go. And so we will be outlining that. The guidance continues to give us the direction. In the few cases that we have had a staff member, we've notified staff, they ask us questions. Really, they tell people to monitor their symptoms. One of the things we keep hearing so far of the little isolated cases of people who've tested within our work areas or within the county of other school district is they say, assume everybody right now, the amount of exposure people have had going in and out of grocery stores, interacting in public, that we all have to assume that we've been tested, that we've been exposed, and so you have to really monitor symptoms. And so there will be some type of communication. If a student has a temperature, already the plans talk about every school site has to have an isolation room. So just in case, while you're waiting for that student to get picked up, that they're not going to be co-spreading that. All of our staff will be trained both on the school's PLP. We think no matter what, it'll be a learning management platform that every teacher can take advantage of where they're doing the virtual. So the nice thing about our new calendar is we have 4 days of, we moved our staff development days, which are normally in our adopted calendar, spread out during the school year. We moved our staff development days to the front of the calendar to allow us the opportunity to front load and to provide professional development for teachers. At tonight's board meeting, I'll talk about some of the other professional development in terms of human relations with implicit bias training that we're going to be providing teachers, and we'll have those prior to that. And then I don't recall the last question. Oh, student, no, at this point, we really don't believe that we will be able to lower the class sizes of our students. And so that is going to be the pro and con when even Mrs. Board Member Hill asked the benefit of a traditional versus a hybrid, because that costs a lot of money. It's really tied to staffing. Staffing ratios or class size is tied to the number of teachers. So even in our online program, we're still talking about trying to keep those staffing ratios the same at the secondary level, at the elementary level, et cetera. So what it may do if more people go to the virtual is it's less number of people physically on a campus, but the staffing ratio will still be 24-1 K3. 32-1, again, that's a staffing ratio. Someone shows up at 33, you don't hire a new teacher at 4-5 and 9-12, 6-12.
Okay. Thank you all for attending. We do need to go into closed session. We will be back here at 6:30. You guys are more than welcome to return at that time or watch us on YouTube. Thank you so much. Going into close.